welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video I'm going to be trying to save my jade plant. Unfortunately there's some kind of rot that's got into the stem and I'm quite worried. It looks like I might lose the whole tree, unfortunately. And this is my favourite one. It's the largest one I've got. It's not the oldest, but this one's growing a lot faster than my oldest one, so it's actually a lot bigger than my oldest. This one's probably coming on to 5 years old now. It has been doing really well. Last summer, its growth slowed down a little bit. I wasn't too concerned because the pot now is too small for the size of the plant. And I'm kind of bonsaiing it anyway by having a small pot. So I was expecting a slower growth pattern, especially as previously I was repotting it every year to encourage really fast growth. But last winter it seemed to struggle, didn't seem to grow as much as usual. I did keep it completely dry for the whole winter, but normally the leaves keep a bit plumper than they did this year. And then come spring, I started watering a bit more. But I only started watering it probably about a month ago, and the leaves just didn't respond as well as usual. Normally the leaves swell up within a couple of days, sometimes even in one day. This year it was a bit slower responding, and it hasn't put on any strong growth, which is a bit concerning. Normally by now it would be putting on strong growth, as it's now May. The other day, what really got me worried is a whole branch actually broke off. So there was a branch here, unfortunately it snapped off, and this is the size of it. It was a decent sized branch, you can see it there. Just fell off by itself, didn't touch it or anything. And I had a look, and the base of it was actually rotten, so I've cut the rotten piece off. This bit's still fine, so I might use that as a cutting. But we'll see how many other cuttings I get from this if that's the case. But the most worrying sign is how much rot there seems to be on the central stem. And usually it does seem to be starting from the middle and not from the roots, which I suppose is probably a good thing, because that means I can hopefully save the main trunk, which is the really nice fat bit here. And it'll be a shame to leave such a big fat trunk on a nice bonsai looking jade plant such as this. So we'll be looking at the roots. I did have this on the balcony last autumn, and I kept it really dry and quite cool, and that was to try and encourage flowering. I did have a few small flowers, which was the first real flowers it had. This is quite a young plant, it doesn't normally flower that much. But I didn't realise until this spring there's actually been a lot of vine weevil on the balcony, so there's a chance the vine weevil might have been eating the roots. That might have caused some infection to get into the root and then spread out the trunk. But as I say, the trunk at the moment seems pretty solid. It does seem to be this top section. But the other worrying sign is there's a few sections which are starting to weep. I gave this a bit of a water the other day because the leaves were looking quite dry. The leaves have actually swollen up a bit now, so it's not completely rotten in the inside. There is enough moisture still getting to the leaves, but it's not as much as it should be because there's definitely rot in there somewhere. But what that also has seemed to have encouraged is some weeping on the trunk, and that shows that we have got a quite bad infection. So I'll give you some close-up shots of that now. So on the main trunk here, you can see this dark section where I cut it away, so that shows there's still infection in there. I need to cut further in. There's also this unusual scar up here. I'm not really sure what that's from, but that wasn't there a few weeks ago. And then going up, there's a bit of a shoot here, and there's a bit of weeping there. I don't know if you can see, it looks slightly wet. And right at the top here, where the branches fork out, you can see there's some wet in the middle as well. So that says to me that the rot is at least from here all the way up to there, which is a real shame because that's the main part of the stem, the nicest part of the tree that I'm going to have to remove. So I'm just going to go ahead now. I'm going to cut into this and see how bad the rot actually is. So unfortunately, because this has showing signs of rot, I will have to cut this off right down here. If I'm lucky, I can hopefully just plant this as a cutting and root that away, but because I've got signs of rot right at the top there, I don't think that's going to be the case. The best case scenario I'm hoping for in this video is I can remove the stem round about here, stop the rot from going into the side, into the centre of the trunk, save the base of the plant, save these two side shoots as well, and hopefully save a little bit of the top. But at the moment it's not looking too good. So I'm going to try and cut this probably with a knife if I can, because my secateurs is going to be really hard to get in here with these other two trunks. Also, this is too wide for my secateurs. Now this is a succulent, so it generally is quite easy to cut with a knife, but when it gets to this kind of thickness it does start to grow some woody growth into it. So I might struggle, so I might not be able to cut it with a knife. I'll see how far I can get with a knife. But I'm expecting there to be a woody core somewhere in this because it is quite an old section of stem. So that was a lot easier than I was expecting. It wasn't too woody, but there's definitely rot. You can see it's right in the middle of the trunk, and the problem is if I leave this it will probably spread to the rest of the trunk. So you can see there the outer section is nice and green, but there's these kind of rotten bits starting to spread from the inside. If I was to leave this whole lot could potentially spread and kill the whole trunk. So I will have to cut deeper on this section, try and find how low it goes. Unfortunately, it might go right down to the base. If that's the case, I'm probably just going to cut as low as I can, probably about to here, and then see if it can recover itself. If not, I'll just have to sacrifice the main part of the plant. So unfortunately, you can see the rot there. It does seem to be going further in. There is normally a bit of a colour difference anyway with the shoot, but there shouldn't be this kind of black brown markings in there. That shouldn't be showing up. So I'm just going to clean off this wound here. So this is the main tree. Unfortunately, I can't just put it in as a cutting like that. It would make a really nice cutting with a beautiful trunk, but I know the rot is at least up to the centre here because there's some weeping going on. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to cut these sections off and see how far the rot has spread. So you can see there's still some rot on this side shoot, so I'm going to have to cut a bit further up. And with that cut, you can see the rot is a little bit less, so I don't have to go too much further, and hopefully the rot will be finished. Now again, the further I go up, the less rot there is. So I can save some of that, but unfortunately it looks like I'll have to lose this side branch here. And then up to this stage, it's looking a lot better, that's looking a lot healthier. There is a little bit of browning going on, but I'm just going to have to have it like that. If I do go any further, I'm going to have some really tiny cuttings. If I wanted to be 100% sure, I could cut these off higher up, but I've got lots of other cuttings which are bigger than this already in the flat, so there's not much point saving tiny little cuttings like this when I know I've got some cuttings elsewhere which are larger than this one. So going into this one, I'm going to have to cut off this side shoot here, see if it's forked to the left as well as to the right. So you can see from that, this side is actually a lot worse. So the first side I cut into was this one, which had a small amount of rotting going on. The second one here has a much worse case of infection, so that one definitely has to be cut back further by the looks of things. So cutting into it, you can see the further I got, the less the infection is. For this one again, even at quite a high height, there's still infection, so it looks like I'll have to sacrifice most of this one. And even up to the tiny cuttings, there's infection. So I could save the tiniest cuttings, like these ones up here. I'll have a look at them. I wouldn't expect the rot to have travelled that far. As you can see, the rot is actually okay. The rot hasn't spread quite as far as that. So I could save these tiny cuttings, but as for the main plant, it looks like unfortunately it will be dying. You can see a cutting there. There's no rot in that, so I could take that as a cutting. But I have got larger cuttings elsewhere, so I probably won't keep that as a cutting. So going back to this main trunk, as I say, there's not a lot I can do. What I'm hoping is I can save maybe one of these branches. So what I might do is actually cut these branches off and see what's remaining on them, see if there's any rot in them. What I will do is I'm just going to sterilise these secateurs now, because these have touched the infected part of the plant. If I now use this on an uninfected part, what could happen is I could spread the infection onto that. So I'm just going to go and disinfect this with swabbing alcohol, and then I'll come back and continue cutting. So I'm going to try and cut this side shoot off, see if I can save that. Unfortunately, it looks like the main trunk will die with the infection being that low down. So I'll give this one a cut and see what it's like. So this one's looking not too bad. There is a little bit of dark speckling inside the middle of it. So I am actually going to cut this a little bit further back, just in case there is rot in there. I just want to be safe. There's no point taking this big cutting and then I actually lose it because it has rot further up than I thought. So that's starting to look a bit healthy. I'll compare that with the piece I just cut off. You can see there's less of that that dark speckling, but there's still a little bit of it, so I'd like to go a little bit further up with that. Unfortunately, I have to be quite careful because I might lose the side branch if I go too high. So that's as far as I think I'll go. That's certainly looking a lot healthier there. That should be infection free. What I will do is I'll spray these cuts with swabbing alcohol. I expect this is probably a bacterial infection because it's quite wet and there's oozing sap. If it was fungal, it would probably look a bit different. So swabbing alcohol should treat a bacterial surface infection. If there's anything deep inside the trunk, then obviously the swabbing alcohol won't treat that, but anything on the surface it should. So we'll be treating that. So that's one cutting I'll be trying to save from this plant. And then the other side, I'll do the same. I'll just sterilise my secateurs first. So this one again, I need to cut a little bit further. There's still a bit of infection in there. And then back to here, it does look like we've got an infection-free section of stem. So I'll be keeping that section. So that's two cuttings I should hopefully be able to take from this plant. It is a real shame because it was my favourite plant. It looked really good. I'm quite sad to actually be having to do this. But I've got those two cuttings there. They're not the greatest of shape. I would like a nicer structure. But I'm just going to have to stick with them. That's all I've really got left from this plant. I could make hundreds of cuttings out of these small leaf tips at the end here. But these little tips, they're not going to come too much, and I've already got lots of small cuttings anyway. These will eventually become nice big plants, but they're going to take a long time, and I've already got lots of other cuttings which are more established than this, so I'll leave them. So going on to the main stem here, I'm going to have a look at the roots. I'm not sure if it did start at the roots, because it doesn't seem too bad at the bottom. It did seem worse in the middle, but I'm still going to have a look, because that's the most likely place for infection to start on the jade plant. So I'm going to take out all the soil, see if the roots are indeed rotting or not, and if there's any sign of vine weevil at all in the compost. So I'm going to try and remove some of this compost, see what I can see. The roots do look quite good. They look healthy enough. There's not any signs of them shriveling up or rotting. But I'm just going to get my old pair of secateurs now and cut away a lot of the base, cut back, see if I can find any signs of infection, anything like that. What I would say about these roots is that the ones at the very bottom aren't as healthy as they should be. So you can see here that's a fresh bit of root growth. The rest of this is looking quite dead, and it's just going to die off, so that's not looking too good. But I'm just going to peel back, as I say, cut back with the secateurs, and see what we've got left. So looking inside the compost here, I can't see any sign of vine weevil, but the roots don't look particularly healthy. These larger roots are still alive, but there's not really any of the finer feeder roots, which is a real bad sign. The compost is slightly damp, but it is mostly dry. It's certainly not waterlogged or anything, so I don't think waterlogging was an issue. Especially as I watered this just a couple of days ago and it's already dried out because the plant sucked up so much moisture. But there should be a lot more young roots in here, so that is a bit concerning. Looking at this main section here, there's quite a few roots I've cut there, but there's nothing too worrying. There's no big wounds I've really created. There's a couple of larger ones here. None of these roots do seem to have any signs of rot in them, so that's a good sign. And I have pruned these roots regularly like this in the past, just to put fresh compost into the pot. And I've never had infection in the past, but I will let these dry out a little bit before potting up. I'll just peel away some of the surface compost as well, just to make sure there's nothing in there, but it does seem to be okay. So again, there's no obvious sign of rot around the base of the trunk, and there's no obvious sign of rot on any of these roots. It is very dry and very compact. This is quite old soil, but I don't want to cut too much into this because I might disturb some of the large roots, and then if I get any large wounds, the infection can get into there as well. As for the infection in the top, I'm not too sure what's going to happen. I'm just going to let it dry out, maybe spray it with a bit of isopropyl alcohol to sterilize it and just see what happens. Hopefully I can get something coming out of this. It is a nice old fat trunk. It would be nice if I could save some of it. I'm just going to let this dry out for a little bit, as I say. I'll let the compost dry out as well because of these wounds. I'm then going to put it in a pot with some a little bit of compost. Probably not in the original pot because I don't want to add too much more soil because it will just stay wet. It needs to have a small amount of soil for now. Keep it quite a dry, kind of lean regime. I don't want to get too wet because the rot could just get worse. And I'll give you guys an update in a few weeks. Hopefully this is going to survive, but as I say, I really don't know. As for the cuttings, I'll be taking some cuttings as well. The largest ones will be this one here, and also this one as well. Unfortunately, they're not the nicest of branch structures, so I might do some pruning with them in the future. And it is a real shame that I've lost this plant. This was one of my favourite plants. It's a shame to see it go. But as I say, the infection's got in. If I was to leave it, I would lose the entire plant. In this regard, by doing this, I'll at least save these 2 large branches. I've got lots of cuttings elsewhere, so I've still got the same genetic material around the flat, so I can always grow a new one. And I'll probably be doing that. I'll probably get my largest cutting that I have, put it in this old pot that it used to be in, and grow that on into a nice jade plant like this one was. The cause of the infection, I'm not too sure. It looks like it could be somewhere deeper down in the roots, but as I say, it's not only weeping, it's not feeling soft, so it does seem to be like it could have been that main section of stem that it started, which would be a bit unusual to have an infection starting in the main bit of stem. But this section of infection here is slightly larger than this section here, which makes me think that the infection probably started midway up. Also with the infection being quite bad at the top there where they're forking. The other unusual thing was this scar here, so I am actually going to cut it right where the scar is, and I did have the branch fall off lower down there, so it feels like the infection may have started higher up, but there is always the chance that it could start at the bottom and then it's just spread more rapidly higher up. But it does seem like the infection started lower down. And you can see there, it is really quite bad in that corner, so it looks like this might have been the source of infection. I don't know what this scar is from. I don't know why that would be damaged on that part of the plant. I can't think of any previous injury that the plant has had to get that damaged. It may have been an insect bite, possibly, that's become infected. But it is an unusual kind of curved shape. It almost looks like a thumbprint. But I can't remember I've put my thumbnail into the trunk like that. So as I say, that's the main plant dead, unfortunately. The majority of it. We've only got the stump and a few cuttings. We'll see if the stump survives. It'll be nice if it does. Otherwise, I'm just going to have to start from scratch again. So that's all for this video. Quite a sad video, unfortunately. I'll be planting up the cuttings soon. I need to let them dry out and callus over. Make sure there's no infection in them. With the main trunk as well, I'll let that dry out, callus over, and then I'm going to be putting some new compost around it and hoping to resprout it. I'll hopefully be able to keep some of this main bottom of the trunk, but it is a shame that I've lost so much. It would have been nice to have a bit more trunk remaining on this plant. So that's all for this video. Hopefully the next update will have a bit better news. But anyway, we'll see how it does, and hopefully I can save something from this plant.